Hello everyone, good morning and good evening. So I'm Kushnu Tawassum. I'm a graduate student at Florida State University, and my major is integrated marketing communication. And I'm originally from Bangladesh, and so this conference is really special for me, and as it is my first conference. So firstly, I'll carry on the introduction part, and each one of you will get 5 minutes. And I will, if you exceed that time, I will interrupt it. Sorry for that. And then we'll move to the further discussions and question answer segment. So yeah, we'll be starting shortly. And if Ola wants to say something, you are
Doing, sorry,
muted.
we can't hear you. No, you're not muted, but I think we can't hear you. So do you want to just unplug your headphone and plug it back in just to see if it works? Sorry about that.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, great. I just want to welcome everyone to the conference and especially to this section. I do not have a lot of instructions to give as Kushner will take over that part of introduction and introducing each speaker and monitoring the time. But before we start, I just quickly want to do like a quick roll call to know if all the six speakers are already here. So just like we do in primary school, elementary school, just I'll call your name and you can just signify however. And if you are here, I would love to see if you can put on your camera or something so we can see your beautiful faces. Okay, so Nagwa, not yet. Miriam, all right. Abina, yay, I see you. Ishrat, yes. Okay, thank you. Insha, yes, I say Ishrat, sorry. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, please pardon me. And Sora Pravo, okay, did I pronounce it right?
Almost.
Thank you for understanding. Okay, so we have 5 people, one more person we're waiting for. Great, we'll start shortly. Thank you.
Shora Prabhu, can you just pronounce your name for us like once again so that we get it right? You can pronounce like give us the Bangla pronunciation. I can catch it.
Yes, it is Shouro Prabhu. Shouro
Shora
means
Prabhu.
Prabhu means
Yeah,
the
I speak Bangla, so that's why I asked you. Shora Prabhu. Okay.
I'll take the opportunity to use this minute that we have before we start to just remind our audiences that we are also streaming this conference session live on YouTube. If you have any questions and if you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll be sure to bring your questions to the participants through our wonderful moderators here. If you're here on Zoom with us directly and if you have questions for us, please feel free to use the chat window in Zoom to ask your questions at the end of the panel. So thank you so much. Oladoin and Kushnur, I think we're good with time, so we can go ahead and get started whenever you're ready. Thank you.
I think we can start now. Yeah, it's that. So once again, hello everyone. Good morning and good evening. I'm Kushnu Tabassum. I'll be moderating this panel with Oladoin. So I will call out your name, and first you give your introduction, and you have 5 minutes to present your research, and then we'll move forward to the next participant. And after that, we'll have a discussion session and a question answer session. So first, I'll start with Nagwa Fahmi, Zayed University, UAE. Her research is about comparing journalistic culture in online digital news outlets in Egypt and Pakistan. Nagwa, are you ready? Okay, she's not here yet, so I'll move to Mariam Haider. She's an independent researcher and writer from India, and her research is about Mabhi Muslim podcasting as a tool for digital activism and social impact. So, Mariam, whenever you are ready.
Thanks, Husnood. Can I just quickly check if you can hear the audio of a deck of the deck I'm running? So if I can just
Yes,
play,
we can see it and I can hear it clearly. Yeah.
if I
you can
play
see.
this,
तो
can you hear
जब
me?
मैं 10th में थी जब मैं 10th standard में थी
Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Good morning and good evening, everyone. I'm Mariam Heather, producer and host of the podcast Main Bhi Muslim. And today I'll be presenting about using podcasting as a tool for digital activism and social impact. I'm going to start with something which is what is Maybe Muslim? And the answer is that it is a podcast which I started in 2020. Maybe Muslim translates to I'm Muslim too in English. And the reasons for it were threefold. One was to expand the definition of the Indian Muslim identity through the lived experiences of women and those on the margins. Second, it was to center voices that counter stereotypes and binary narratives. And the third was to really create a feminist space that can challenge patriarchy and Islamophobia within and outside the community through these voices. The reason why I really chose podcasting, and we discussed that in the interactive session, was also that podcasting really helps in countering an attention economy. In the world of TikToks and Reels, you can sit with a conversation with intent and listen to it and really reflect on what and how it speaks to you. The second is low barriers to entry. Anyone can join whenever they want. And the third is it is easily and freely accessible to everyone. There's a screenshot of my podcast here, which is on Spotify. You can go on Apple Podcasts, you can go on Google Podcasts. It's available everywhere. And in the dominant market of South Asia, India is expected to become the third largest listening market for podcasts. So the world, the space is vibrant, and there's a very growing number of listeners who would like to tap into this. But the real reason of starting Maybe Muslim, the podcast, is that the Indian Muslim women's identity has largely been stereotyped. Either it's stereotyped with a North Indian Persianate culture where the understanding of a Muslim woman is someone who's going to follow the norms and the societal expectations which are predominant within the dominant part of Muslim community in North India. Or you'll find a Muslim woman who's indoctrinated and subjected to some kind of violence or abusive behavior within the society. But Maybe Muslim tackles that and aims to really expand that definition. I'm going to present 3 case studies and 3 conversations. And these are, one of them is Madina B and Fatima Sheikh, who are footballers at Parcham Collective in a Mumbai suburb. Both Madina and Fatima come from the same community, same religious background, same economic background. They want to have, they have the same ambition, which is to become footballers. But while Madina faced no challenges in having her parents approve of her, dreams, Fatima has faced enormous amounts of challenges. And this is a short clip. It's in Hindi, but I'd love to explain to you later.
तो जब मैं 10th में थी जब मैं 10th standard में थी तो परचम हमारे स्कूल में आया था और they were mobilizing for girls to play तो मुझे उन्होंने फॉर्म दिया कंसेंट लेटर फॉर्म दिया और उन्होंने बोला कि do you want to join तो the first thought I came to my mind was कि क्या मेरे अब्बा अलाउ करेंगे क्या मेरे अम्मी अलाउ करेंगे और क्या मैं खेल पाऊंगी.
So this conversation really reflects on like the difficulties and also the reservations the girls had. But when you listen to this conversation, you see that there is so much tenacity and so much courage that they depict in really trying to overcome these challenges and really chase their football dreams the way they want to. The second case study is of Sara Abubakar, who was a noted Kannada writer and feminist thinker. And she came from the Bihari Muslim community, which is in the southwestern coast of India. And she wrote about the religious orthodoxy and conservatism within the community that often subjugated women into practices, into realities that they were not comfortable with, and they wanted to fight that out. But Sara Abubakar faced a lot of resistance from within and outside her community. And when I spoke to her friend, Dr. Sabiha Bhumigoda, a lot of it I learned was about her life and her personal journey in meeting those challenges. And it was only through this conversation that I was able to understand how Sara Abubakar really wrote about the situation of the Bihari community, but also how personally tackled these challenges, which I believe just reading in a news article or a journal would not have been possible. And the last example is of Sulfat Leila, who is a co-founder of a Kerala-based NGO, Vanaja Collective. She identifies as a queer Muslim, and Sulfat came on the podcast and talked about how these realities and these identities she's navigating. And this very small glimpse of the conversation reflects that. When I started working in the political area and queer community, I understood the importance of claiming my identity as a Muslim queer woman. I think just to end this presentation is that the reason why I started the podcast is to be a part of the larger stories that perhaps go amiss in the mainstreamization of identities in India. Stories keep us alive. They help us remember our past, honor our present, and reimagine our futures. And in a space and in a situation where there's a force of rigidity within the identities, there's been a constant push to erase a diverse voice. I think the act of sharing and listening to stories is an act of preservation and an act of self-preservation, so self-affirmation. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and I hope to take all the questions you might have.
Thank you, Mariam. It was a wonderful topic. I'm personally very much interested about it, and we'll discuss further in our discussion section. So next we have Arbina, and she's from University of Kashmir, India, and Mohammad Asif, University of Kashmir, and her topic is digital tools for women's health and exploration of menstrual tracking app motivation in Kashmir. So Arbina, are you ready? You can go.
Yeah, so greetings to everyone. I will be sharing my screen first. Yeah, is the screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it's visible. Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, greetings to all the respected members of the conference and fellow researchers. My name is Urbina, and today I'm honored to share the joint research paper titled Digital Tools for Women's Health and Exploration of Menstrual Tracking App Motivations in Kashmir. And I am really excited to share the insights or the findings of this study at the 10th anniversary of South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference. In the backdrop of a rapidly digitizing world where health technology is increasingly becoming a part of our daily lives, our research took a closer look at how digital tools, specifically menstrual tracking apps, were being utilized by women in Kashmir. The study is not just about technology, it's a narrative of empowerment, health awareness, and the evolving role of digital tools in managing women's health. The digital age has seen a proliferation of mobile health apps, but there is a special subset that merits attention: fertility tracking or menstrual tracking apps. These tools are more than just technological novelties. They represent a significant shift in how women manage and understand their reproductive health. The studies on menstrual tracking apps from developing countries are understudied. Further, the literature on health apps in India does not provide an adequate and detailed description of women's use of menstrual tracking apps, their experiences, and digital practices. Therefore, our research aimed to fill this gap. We aim to explore the use of menstrual tracking apps among women and capture their experience of app use. Our exploratory study focused on women using menstrual tracking apps from at least 6 months. We aim to uncover the purpose for which women in the Kashmir region were turning to these apps. To achieve this, we conducted telephonic semi-structured interviews with 30 women in the city of Srinagar, Kashmir through purposive and snowball sampling. Data collection continued until we reached a point of saturation. The data underwent a rigorous process of manual coding and thematic analysis, which finally revealed distinct themes. The findings were illuminating. They revealed the 5 main motives for which women used menstrual tracking apps. Women use these apps to track their period dates, to plan their tasks, know about ovulation, monitor premenstrual syndrome PMS and reproductive health, and track their irregular menstrual cycles and PCOS. Firstly, women use these apps primarily for menstrual and ovulation tracking. This function was fundamental, allowing women to predict and prepare for their menstrual cycles. Another key insight was the role of these apps in personal schedule management. Women reported that they could plan their activities better considering their menstrual cycles. This aspect of planning is crucial, especially in context where menstrual health still carries societal stigmas. Perhaps most importantly, the study highlighted a sense of community and shared experience. Women didn't just use these apps in isolation, they often recommended them to friends and relatives, expanding the network of informed and empowered users. The most notable finding from our interviews with women was the use of these apps in tracking polycystic ovary syndrome (PCOS). This was a key addition to the existing literature, which primarily highlights general uses of these apps. Our study revealed a more nuanced application. These apps were being leveraged as tools for early detection and management of PCOS, a condition that affects a significant portion of women worldwide. And as per the study conducted in 2020, Kashmir region had the high prevalence of PCOS. The use of menstrual tracking apps helped women to detect and track irregularity in menstruation, as it was the first sign of such disorders. These apps empowered women with crucial health information, enabling them to seek timely medical advice and intervention. This aspect of self monitoring and early detection is transformative in managing reproductive health. This research, while focused on Kashmir, has implications that resonate globally. It underscores the potential of digital tools in enhancing healthcare literacy, autonomy, and the well being of women in developing countries. It also points to a need, the need for healthcare professionals and policymakers to recognize and integrate these tools into broader health systems and acknowledge the potential of digital health tools in addressing specific and critical women's health issues. Understanding the goals and experiences of women who use these apps will help healthcare professionals and policymakers design interventions and support systems that enhance women's reproductive health and general well being. That was all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvina, for your wonderful presentation. Now I'll move with Ishrat Singh from Punjab University, Punjab. And her research is about rape in the digital print and analysis of rape coverage in newspaper website.
Hello, thank you. This is a he, not a she, but it's
Sorry,
okay.
I'm
I know
sorry
my
for
name
that.
is.
I
It's
didn't
okay. My name is Evan. But thank you so much for the introduction.
Ishrat is a very common name in Bangladesh for women, so that's why sorry for that.
It is, I know, Bangladesh and Pakistan. I grew up very late to change my name when I realized it's a female name, but it's okay. In today's world, it's okay. Anyway, thank you so much for the introduction. And greetings to everybody around the world who's present here. My name is Ishrat Singh. I am a research scholar in Punjab University, Chandigarh, India, and I am also a practicing journalist. In this little time that I have, I'm going to run you through my research paper, which is basically about how rape is covered in mainstream news, which is actually also a part of my thesis, my PhD thesis. I want to start by telling you that the data relating to rapes in India is truly mind-boggling. I'm sure you have come across certain numbers, such as a rape is reported in India every 16 minutes. And for every one reported case, 30 are said to go unreported. What's more, 99% of rape cases in India are said to be going unreported. Rape being unreported is an issue all over the world. And in my research, in my review of literature, I came across the fact that it has been for the last many decades, actually. However, out of the ones that are reported, only a few make it as a big story in the news media. These very few cases or stories contribute to the above stated data by setting the agenda. The way these stories are presented or the framing is another contributor to the way the society perceives rape and contributes to the fact that they are underreported. This paper thus tries to shine the light on the issue of sensationalism and the reinforcement of rape myths and stereotypes in Indian mainstream news. So, for this study, I wanted to take a sample that is reflective of information that reaches most of the people in India. So, India's highest circulated English daily language newspaper, the Times of India, was chosen for this. And I found a total of 957 write ups. This could be news, articles, opinion, anything which covered rape. And the time period for this was the last 3 months of 2023. The unit of analysis is the word rape. And that is why I said any kind of story, hard news, soft news, opinion, even letters to the editor, everything came under the purview of this to have a holistic view of the coverage in a newspaper. So the major objectives of this study were to identify rape-related stories in these sample newspapers in this time and check for the presence of terms or the language that reinforces these rape myths, the stereotypes, gender differences, and especially sensationalism. And then to conduct an analysis of this rape-related coverage with the purpose of identifying the meaning and context, and then relating it to what the previous studies have found that how it is hurting the cause of the issue of rape. I'll quickly run through the findings. A significant finding is that not the crime, but the people involved in it decide how this story is going to be presented or if it will become big or not. Now, this is because the stories that are given more words or follow ups or those are highlighted are the ones which either include a significant person, which could be either the survivor victim or the perpetrator or the accused. So basically, what this finding tries to say is also that we are indulging more in event-based coverage rather than issue-based coverage, which is needed. News media also tends to highlight stories which either involve a public figure or, on the other hand, they have some unusual or unique circumstances. Any rape case from India that will come to your mind, because it made it big, will have something unique or something that is not usual. The biggest one that you can probably think of is the Delhi gang rape case, the Nirbhaya case in 2012. And we all know because of the heinousness of the crime and not just the rape itself is the reason why it was highlighted so much. And that, while it sounds positive that it mobilized people, is a negative because the issue of rape somewhere gets sidelined and we concentrate on the other crimes, for example, murder or the heinous violence of it. So, of the total data that was analyzed, 53% of the stories were found to be sensational, more than half. The next one is that at times, terms that are used to address the perpetrators or the accused are those that represent them not as a part of the regular society. And this is a practice that previous works have always recommended should be avoided. For example, using a term like monster, because this means that we are trying to say he cannot be a regular everyday guy next door, but someone who looks different, which we all know is not true. One finding is that in most of the stories, the newspapers successfully hide the identity of the rape survivor or the victim, as they should. And in some cases, even when the perpetrator is related to the survivor or the victim, their identity is also withheld to protect the survivors. This actually went against a hypothesis that I had that newspapers are indirectly revealing the identity of the survivor or the victim. And this also goes against a general notion that reporters are callous in their reporting sensitive issues. And this obviously is in consonance with the Supreme Court's directions to not disclose identities. But in many stories, the reporters tend to disclose more information or facts about the survivor, which are not at all related to the crime, which could be their location, their profession, their office location, the profession of their parents, their colleges, schools, all those kind of things. And when you compare it to the perpetrator or the accused, this information is much more, while we would prefer that it should be the other way around. Also, many stories do not reveal the identity of the perpetrator till a later stage or maybe till the end of a story. And this is a concern that is related to framing of how stories are framed. However, in all of the stories, the perpetrator, in my stories, the perpetrator is a male and the survivor or victim is a woman. Either the opposite crime is underreported or the newspapers are not covering it. So, because I said my scope was only the stories that had the word rape, but in case somebody is interested in finding out why, it is mainly because in case it is male on male crime, the Indian newspapers or Indian news media refers to it as sodomy. So that does not have the same impact because we are discussing context. Because we're short on time, I'm going to conclude by saying that the reporting of a crime as sensitive as rape needs to be done responsibly and with due diligence. For the same, I think training in academia as well as in the professional setup is required. While all this is improving, as this study has found in terms of concealing identity, there is much to desire as far as not sensationalizing the same is concerned. Not only this, the presentation and display of such stories needs to be significant along with the coverage, as this crime has been found to be highly underreported in more than one researches in all across the timeframes and all over the world. However, the use of certain terms and adjectives along with the angles given create myths and stereotypes about the rape culture, which is thus normalized. Hence, the same also needs to be avoided. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishrat. So before moving forward, I would personally like to thank all the presenters for like coming up with such topics like which are the stereotypes of South Asian region, and we seriously need to address them. So moving forward, we have Isha Rashid from University of Kashmir, India, and her research is about emergence of social influencers in Srinagar, Kashmir, India. Isha, are you here?
No, I believe Insha is not here with us,
Okay.
so we can move on. Thank you.
So we'll move on. So we'll move on to Shoraprabha Chatterjee from University of Calcutta, India, and his research is about culture through the lens of online gaming, Indian perspective. So Shoraprabha, whenever you are ready.
Hello, am I audible and visible?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and good evening from India. Myself, Shoraprabha Chatterjee. I am from University of Calcutta. And today, I'm going to present my paper entitled Culture Through the Lens of Online Gaming and Indian Experience. So let us, without any further ado, let me begin. The term play has always had a social dimension. It is a key element in the evolution of civilization and also an integral part of our everyday lives. Online games are of no difference. In this context, it is important to analyze the practice of online gaming under the broader umbrella of digital leisure activities and see to it the proliferation of gaming as a new media, form, and cultural artifact. So let us have a brief overview of the Indian gaming industry. India is witnessing a steep rise of gaming culture like never before. Last year, in 2023, the number of online gamers in India soared to an impressive 442 million, establishing it as the second largest gaming base globally, just after China. However, despite being one of the most populous countries in the world with around 622 million internet users and around 690 million smartphone users, India is relatively new to both mass-scale computer and internet access. Currently, we see that especially independent game developers are increasingly using aspects of cultural traditions, practices, and heritages from regional Indian contexts to shape the form and content of some of their games. In doing so, one of the key elements or the key strategies they adopt to implement cultural elements is to refer to mythology in storylines and as well as in the aesthetics. A case in this point is Hanuman, the boy warrior. This is the game. So it was released in 2009, which claimed to be the first console game developed entirely in India. This was based on Hindu mythology and represents Hanuman, a highly popular Hindu deity with scriptural representation in the Indian epic Ramayana and many other important texts. Such games used of terminology such as the names of the classical texts or figures or art styles without making any actual transmitted heritage about the major theme of the game. Nevertheless, some games implement cultural heritage elements in a more direct way, and they do it consciously, as we'll see in the following examples. This is again Raji, an ancient epic. It is an action-adventure game developed by Nodding Heads based in Pune, India. The game revolves around a young girl named Raji's adventure with her journey to rescue her brother and to face the treacherous demon Mahabalashur. The music on the background music use tablas and other Indian instruments. The main character is also dressed and adorned with jewelry, which evokes traditional Indian dress styles. A second example is Antariksha Shamachar, which is known as the transmissions in space. It is a speculative adventure inspired by the vibrant culture of South India and inspired by the dream theorems of mathematician Srinivas Ramanujan and originating from an opera by the classical dancer Jayalakshmi Eshwar. The game includes elements pointing to the historical life of the South Indian mathematician as well as elements of science fiction and steampunk. Another one is Missing, a game for a cause. It is a perfect example for how online games are gradually transforming into the perfect medium for telling unique personal stories and generating empathy through active participation. The player takes the role of an abducted girl who is sold and trying to find her way to freedom. During gameplay, the player is exposed to the theme of human trafficking in India. There are several other examples too, including the discussed ones, which vividly attest to trend to turn to Indian cultural aspects. They also depict how much thought, skill, and resources these independent developers invest to implement or in all this. Although it is not just game developers who have been revisiting the theme of Indianness, but the Indian government has been actively exhorting the game industry to adopt Indian ethos and values. At the same time, games like Razi has been criticized both for not having Indian language versions, which they rectified later, and for the way in which they flatten the Indian in history and mythology into a caricature, ostensibly with a Hindu bias that subconsciously reflects far-right nationalism. To conjecture, we can expect to see a lot more gaming content across familiar and diverse cultural heritages, mythologies, and epics in a more just and efficient way, as well as casual games one may have played while growing up, like Ludo or so on, just on a different medium, and also not by just a handful of independent studios, but by big players as well. So thank you for listening. That is from it from my end.
Thank you, Sharaprabha. So I don't think we have Isha and Nagwa. So Vaibhav, are they here, or sh should we move forward to the question answer session?
Yeah, I don't see them yet, Kushnut. So I think we've got a lot of questions for the presenters already, both here
Exactly.
as well
Yeah.
as on YouTube. So please bring them up. So I request the presenters to please come on the screen, all of us. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go to the question and answer section, but we have quite a number of questions, but there's a general question for that everyone would answer. Like, we want to kind of connect your research with the topic of the conference. So how, as your individual research is like being for public good, how has it been for, how does it tally or relate to the topic of the conference? So we'll start from Miriam. Do you want to start that up, please? Thank you.
Sure. I mean, it's a very good question to ask in terms of like, what are the inclinations of even starting a digital project? And I think for a lot of us here, and also for a lot of independent creators, I think it always comes from a place of what is missing. And usually what is missing is a sense of reflection, is a sense of association or representation. And I think that's where digital media comes really handy, because all of us are connected through the digital world. And the more we see the world through that lens of representation, we can identify what's missing. And so when you create for something that's missing, it automatically adds to the diversity and to the richness of a culture, or richness of a conversation. And I think that serves to the interests of public good, or good for digital.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll still go to like deeper questions that that are popping up on the live stream and in the chat. So let's go to Abina. Do you want to tell us how it is good for the public?
Yeah, so actually, I think I already answered bit of this in my presentation, that that women turning to menstrual tracking apps for learning about their reproductive health, learning about what is going on in their bodies, is actually a shift from traditional form of gaining information from a healthcare professional or someone they trust closely or they know closely, because in South Asian context, especially in a region like Kashmir, still talking about menstruation is a taboo. It is still a societal stigma, even though we are saying that, you know, people are becoming tech savvy, technology is coming in, but still this aspect is still remains behind the walls. It is still not, talked about openly. So now women can, install these apps in their phones and track their cycles, know about their bodies, know about their reproductive health, just with a fingertip, just with a click away. So I think it clearly resonates with the theme of the conference, like digital for good or digital transformation of South Asian mediascape, because we see a shift from a traditional form of information access or information seeking to a more technological form.
Thank you very much. That is beautiful. Okay, so let us go to Ishrat. Do you want to talk about your topic?
Thank you so much. I will try and answer the other question, which is addressed to me as well in the chat. But first of all, how this study helps to contribute towards the overall theme of digital media for inclusive and sustainable South Asia. So digital media is the future. When we talk about news, everybody says print is dying, but the truth is print is not dying. It's just that the medium has changed. Maybe the newspaper as such is dying, but now they have pivoted to the digital world, the news websites and the apps, which are now taking over. So it becomes very important to study these. And South Asia, obviously, for the longest time has had a problem, as has the rest of the world, with women empowerment or that minority facing a lot of crime. And that is why studying that I thought was very important. And also, now we are moving towards the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations member states. And goal number 5 is to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. So that is why I also thought it is very important to address this and write a paper on this. And this study will obviously add to the literature also, and do so while analyzing news coverage on digital media. And that is why it was very important. And I will answer the next question, which will answer the other part of the first question about policy making. And
Ishrat, sorry to cut. I'm sorry to cut in. We will get to the individual questions shortly.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just a general round. Thank you. Okay, Shuro Provo, I'm sorry, Shuro Provo, can you talk about your research and how it is good for everyone? Please go ahead. Yes.
Yes. As I have given a few statistics in my presentation, the gaming industry has a substantial economic impact in the Indian economy as well as in South Asian economy, and encompassing game development, hardware manufacturing, and other related aspects. So it generates a significant revenue and job opportunities, contributing to global economy as well. And online media and the digital media provide a platform for diverse voices, stories, and gaming can be used as a tool for storytelling. It can be used in educating students, as we can see examples in the Western countries. This helps in preserving and promoting the rich cultural heritage also, as I have mentioned in the presentation. Fostering understanding and the appreciation among the different communities. As I can summarize the total thing, by harnessing the potential and of online gaming and digital media, South Asian countries can create a more inclusive, more sustainable, and interconnected region, addressing various social issues, economic issues, and environmental challenges, while celebrating the richness of their cultural diversity as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We still have like some time to talk about questions. So now we'll go to like the individual questions. And what we will do is get one question from the live stream and one question for the chat. One question like go in and out of the live stream and the Zoom platform. So the first question that is coming from the live chat is for Miriam, and it says, what audience have you found your podcast to reach?
So my audiences are largely like within the South Asian and the North American community, which is fascinating considering that sometimes I often feel the reflection of the community vibrancy comes from within the community itself. So Indian Muslimness, so largely it's India, South Asia, but North America is definitely an audience that is increasing in the numbers as I see over the years.
Great. Just a follow-up question, and this is for me for this question. So considering the audience, like how does the audience, if a large population are coming from the US, how does that positively impact the South Asian region? Is it, well, I hope it's not a matter of the audience is more of outside population than the people it is meant to serve, or is it meant to serve everyone?
So it's meant to serve the larger Indian Muslim community, because as I said, even within the Indian Muslim community, there's a lot of mainstreamization of identity. So when you look at, I mean, I'm going to use the word Bollywood. Largely the Hindi film industry has used the Muslim identity in a very binary narrative. We are unfortunately not apprised with the kind of literature and the kind of experiences that the large country of India has when it comes to the Indian Muslim identity. And the North American audience or the Western audience is also part of that audience culture. Like they're probably not tapping into, or they don't have resources to tap into a Hyderabadi writer from the 1950s talking about feminism, or Sara Abu Bakr, who wrote in a Kannada language, which is, again, not a language that a lot of Indians in North India would speak. So there's always this sense making that to understand a Muslim identity, you'll come from the dominant or the perspective that has been created as a dominant perspective. And that's the intention with Maybe Muslim, the podcast, which is to try to break that lens of the dominant gaze, and to really constantly puncture that with conversations that can make people within the community recognize what has been outside of their thinking or lens, and people who are outside the community also be like, it is as diverse as any other community, perhaps.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Ishrat, would you address the question in the chat? Do I have to read it out, or you're fine? You've already read it.
Okay. It's okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Ishrat, sorry, would you read the question for our YouTube audiences, because they're not able to see the questions on Zoom? So if you could just read the question first and then answer it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the question from Pooja to me was, how do you propose the problematic framing of rape cases in Indian press to be addressed? Do you think trainings on data-driven journalism to focus on the story under consideration happen currently? And are they helpful? Wonderful question. This is an important recommendation that has to come out from not just my paper, but from my PhD thesis as well. So there is twofold solution that is being recommended. Number one is that the academia, when you're teaching journalism students, media studies has to include this. It has to be a part of their training. Number two, it has to be a part of the style sheet of newsrooms, because there are a lot of trainings and sensitization happening for a lot of journalists, but the practical reality is that it has not converted into results. Now, for example, the style sheet of a lot of newsrooms will say that you do not have to identify the survivor or victim. And even this study found that that is being successfully done because it is a part of the style sheet. However, when I presented this paper, I kept using victim and survivor together. But most of the news media that you will see still addresses everyone as victim. Now, there are ample studies to tell us when we use victim, when we use survivor, and that they are not interchangeable, right? But because there is no rule about it, there is nothing in the style sheets of newsrooms or students of media not being told how to use these terms. That is why we are seeing that practically on the ground there is no such implementation. So the answer in short is training media students and making it a part of the style sheets in the newsrooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishrad. Asif has a question. Can you please unmute and ask your question?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks a lot. Yeah, am I audible first?
Yes, you are.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I was very fascinated with the presentation of, if I pronounced it correctly, so Mr. Saurabh Prabhu Chatterjee. I wanted to ask him, is whatever the representation he has seen in the games, these Indian games, don't doesn't he think that it's again an extension of, I will say, the mainstream cinema, or the traditional representation of women in Indian cinema, like a damsel in distress kind of a thing, and doesn't it play in the traditional notions of masculinity, whatever his sample of the study is? And also, I would also seek clarification from him that are these kinds of games in which he talked about a game wherein there is human trafficking and a girl is sold, and the character goes after for searching. Is it like restricting women? Isn't it restricting women's agencies and uh, putting them through stereotypical lenses? I think he should also look into the creators of the games. Who are the creators of the game, whether they are male or female? I think that will also add value to his study. So these are my couple of questions I would like answer for them. Thank you.
Yes, Asif, thank you for your question. To answer to your last question is the most of the game developers in India here are male, and as you have pointed out that the game have a bias in the game, the mission, the last
Questions
game.
I would like answer.
Yes. Hello.
Please continue.
Yes.
Sorry.
There's a bias in the in like
You're muted. You may want to unmute. Sure, Provo, are you still with us?
sorry, yes, yeah. There's a bias. There's a bias, and that needs to be corrected. So this is my suggestion. And after the studying these games, I can say all that.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. If there is anyone on the Zoom page that wants to ask a question, you can just use the reaction button to raise your hand, and we'll call on you. We're going back to the online questions, and this question I have is, one of the question is, what are some of the main apps the women in Kashmir were using? And I think this is for Abina. So someone wants to know the main apps that you think women are using.
The names of the app that women were using mostly, that came up while I conducted the study. The mostly used app was Flow, followed by Maya and Period Calendar. These three were mostly used among women.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so there's a question here sorry, I think the question is for Miriam, and it says, it's on the chat. Did you face any backlash for conducting the podcast? If yes, how did you handle that?
I must say, I always get this question. So in a way, I'm prepared. I have been, I think, in a way, I would say lucky in that sense, that the backlash has not really been to the point where it affects my working sort of, or the goals I have with the podcast. An interesting observation I've had with the podcast is that I often, if it can be called backlash, if like a negative comment or something, comes from what would be, I don't know who these accounts are from, but it's accounts of people with Muslim names, mostly men, who will say that this is not the way that a Muslim woman is supposed to talk, or they'll have some objection to the conversation or the topic I've chosen for that episode, which is the kind of backlash I've experienced. But I won't call it backlash. I'll simply call it trolling of sorts. But I think I think it's an aspect that comes through podcasting. It's because it's long form audio. You need to sit with the conversation. You need to listen to a 45 to 50-minute conversation to make your assessment of whether you want to have some kind of opinion on it. And I think that's one big reason why with podcasting, a lot of times the negativity, well, somebody needs to listen for 1 hour and send me a negative comment. So if they're ready to spend 1 hour and they don't like it, we'll see, but not necessarily, no. It hasn't yet come. It's not it really comes down to attention economy, so to speak.
Thank you for that good
I will interrupt for a moment. Actually, I asked that question to Mariam.
okay.
If that's okay, I have a follow-up question. I'm just curious to know that, you mentioned earlier that your audiences are mostly based on this like American side, I guess, something you mentioned about. So I just wanted to know that what is the reach of your podcast within the South Asian region? And that's why actually I mentioned about the backlash, because recently, even like the things like this, like in your presentation, I was seeing that there was an episode about a queer Muslim woman. So usually in a South Asian region, if like any medium or any person raises topic like that, it feel not even backlash. The person who writes that he or she face threats. So considering that, what are the like what is your like what are the perspective of the audiences from your like your region, and how they are responding to this sort of topic? I just wanted to know that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kosnud. It's such a wonderful thing to ask in that sense, because I think I would give credit to all the guests who come on the podcast. My work and my intention is to create a space and to be just a medium for that conversation. And so the credit really goes to those people who talk about their experiences, who are ready to share their lived realities publicly. And what I have observed, in the end, I come out more just more encouraged and more inspired by these conversations. So at the end of the day, I feel like I'm really doing it as a sense of self-preservation as well. The queer identity, particularly, I think within the South Asian community, I have largely seen that there is a sense of acceptance that is emerging slowly, silently, but it's there. The intersectionality of being a Muslim and a queer person is where I feel like the work really goes for the people who talk about it, is that how do they navigate that? And I think in the conversation, if you get a chance, I highly recommend you listen to it as well, is Sulfa does mention this part that when she moved out of home, when they moved out of home, they moved out of because they were rebellious, because they were just not comfortable with that environment where two men were really governing the lives of women. But as they have, met people from the queer community, as they have met people from the political activist spaces, they recognize how important it is to embrace all these identities they have. And with that, acceptance, with that sort of comfort of accepting every identity that you carry, I think it just builds the courage and the clarity to speak about it. So yeah, I think all the credit to all the guests who come on the podcast.
Wonderful, Mariam. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Vaibhav, do you want to read out a question on YouTube?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Oladoin. We got quite a few questions from Amatullah on YouTube. Mariam, while I have you here, I'm probably start with you. So the comment is wonderful, maybe Muslim presentation. The question is more about your method, which is what is your criteria of data collection? And then the other question is more about analysis, which is, have you done any analysis of how many young Muslim women in India have been facilitated by the government, as in what kind of governmental support or local support have they received, if at all, in your analysis?
Thanks, Vaibhav. I think again, both terrific questions. How do I select my guests? So Maybe Muslim started with two people, me and my former co-host, and the idea was to talk to each other and share those conversations publicly. And so mostly it was we sharing our experiences growing up as Indian Muslim women. But as the podcast evolved, I began having more and more guests. I started reaching out to people. And I think at the core of it all, my assessment is always at looking someone who's on the margins of the margin. So the Indian Muslim identity has, over a period of time, been marginalized in different capacities. But there are people, and largely women or people from the minority genders, who also talk about how the patriarchy or the sexism or the homophobia. Again, these are very selective identifiers, but there are multiple sets of these marginalizations that play on their reality. So you are a Muslim person, but you are also someone who's queer. You might be someone who's facing economic challenges. How do you tackle that? How do you identify how that the world looks at you a certain way? Do they look at you as a woman? Do they look at you as a Muslim woman? Whether you're wearing a hijab, whether you're not wearing a hijab? And so my work, and I think that's where I call it the methodology or the research, really goes into like understanding and assessing how much are they ready to talk about this kind of intersectionality, this kind of navigation of realities. Because at the end of the day, it's not just one challenge. If there is Islamophobia, there is also patriarchy, and one does not cancel the other. And I think I'm always learning through the guests I invite, and the work is always to keep on growing and having these conversations. So that's sort of like the way I navigate. The second question is on analysis, right? Like what kind of support Muslim women have had. I think I would turn that question around, is like, what kind of support have women had in the larger Indian communities, in the places we live? Because what Radhika was sharing earlier, like you have this population in the rural parts of India, which the urban people just don't know about. Like they probably don't understand that their realities, their challenges, their grievances, and the split and the divide is massive. I'm not understating that when I say this. And so the work of like, how has the government supported Muslim? And I think the government needs to, or policies need to be designed that can recognize that syncretism, yes, but also this divide that is like, you can be a Muslim woman, but if you are from a dominant caste, there is a caste system that also operates within the Indian Muslim space. You probably do not understand what it means to be coming from a tier 2 town or a tier 3 town carrying that Muslim identity. You probably will also have a disconnect. And so the policies need to engage with all those hierarchies and all those levels. And I think policy wise, I can say that there are several policies for the marginalized groups, but there is also a reality that there is a constant marginalization that's happening, and there's a constant push to create a very rigid Islamophobic narrative. And I think that is the bigger question that needs to be tackled right now. And I think, and at the end of the day, I think, listen to any conversation, like women are far more capable of managing themselves than perhaps anyone else.
I love that hand and part. Thank you. Thank you. So before we go to YouTube again, let's ask a question on some other question. So I'm directing this question to Ishrat. So the question here is, what steps do you believe must be taken for equal treatment of rape stories in the media?
This is just as I answered in the chat, but as I said, this is twofold. One, when you're teaching journalism students, there has to be specific training on how to treat rape cases because it is a very special cause. And India already sees a lot of, actually, the whole world sees it, but India is seeing a very big problem in terms of coverage of rape. And secondly, when it is in the newsrooms, trainings and sensitizations can help to an extent, but it has to be a part of the style sheets because every organization has a style sheet, how you refer to something, how you write a story, how the salutations have to be. So it has to be a part of those style sheets. Only then can we bring a bigger change that will make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Thank
you. So we have Ashif again wants to ask a question. Please, you can ask a question now.
Yeah, thanks again. This question directs to Miss Mariam. I'm saying this that there are definitions in every religion for the followers of that particular religion, and there could be people who have stories to tell on your podcast, but who may have transcended the boundaries of religion in one or the other way. So can I say you are taking a high ground, religious high ground here by putting them in your podcast, whose title is "Maybe Muslim" because it's a statement. I too am a Muslim. So don't you see that there's a high ground involved in your, a linguistic. I will say linguistic there are terms of the language that you are using in the title of your podcast. I'll refer an example of Ahmadiyya Muslims who somehow sort of fiddle with the boundaries of the religion called Islam. Uh, the majority of the followers of Islam do not consider them Muslim. But see, if there's a woman of Ahmadiyya community coming on to a podcast with her story, which highlights as or which is titled as "Maybe Muslim." So how does a listener, a common listener, make sense of that? Because then it will be very difficult for them to understand what is the meaning of
Asif, we cannot hear you, but Miriam, do you catch the gist, like the major point that he's trying to ask?
heinous. Yeah. Can I continue
Oh,
with my
please, yeah,
last question?
sure. We lost you for a bit.
It will be the last. Thank you. I come from Kashmir, and there was a heinous crime committed against a young girl. I will not name her here, since I also come from journalism background. So her name was like all over Indian media, directly taken even by Bollywood celebrities, and almost all the channels were involved in taking her name directly. Mr. Ishan, how do you make sense of that? We saw a case at Delhi wherein the name was changed to Nirbhaya, but when it came to Kashmir, there was no such parameter followed. Uh, we cannot argue that Indian media does not know this rule of not highlighting the name of the victim. But then why this selective treatment, and how does one make sense of it? Thanks a lot.
That is a good question, but Asif, if you are from the let's hear from Mariam first. Yes, please, Mariam, go ahead. I'll come back to it.
Thanks, Ishrat. Right. So, Asif, the question you've asked me is the high ground, and I think I'm glad you asked this question, but I'm also doubtful if the question can be answered unless someone. I mean, I would urge you to listen to the podcast because when you say there's a high ground, I think the assertion of maybe Muslim comes when there is a concerted effort to diminish and erase the reality of someone. I don't speak of religious identity. Muslimness, that's the way I define the podcast. I call it like expanding the definition of Indian Muslimness because I don't think anyone is right to comment on how someone practices their faith. I think it's a very personal endeavor. Yes, there are certain ways that people expect others, but I think at the end of the day, it's a very personal journey one makes when they choose to practice a religion or be of a faith. podcast is exclusively on the idea of the way this identity shows up for you. The fact that someone's name is a Muslim name doesn't mean that a person will ask them like, oh, how many times do you pray before giving them a flat? If a person's name is Muslim and there is a concerted effort to not give apartments to someone carrying a Muslim identity, then they don't care how someone is practicing the religion. A name is enough. And that's the essence of having Maybe Muslim, that people can talk about these experiences where they feel safe and they feel heard, and they can talk about how these experiences have played on their lives. How they religiously practice, how they religiously uphold their religion, I think is a very personal question, and those questions are not entertained or asked on the podcast. It's a reflection of how this identity is seen from the outside, and really navigated within the spaces the Indian Muslim folks find themselves in. So yeah, I mean, I think I would say that answers your question.
Thank you, Miriam. Thanks for that answer. Ishrat, do you want to respond?
Yes. As I was saying, Asif, the case you've mentioned to, I know exactly what case you are referring to, and you've compared it to the other very big case for the Indian nation. See, first of all, the logic given by the media then was that the Kashmiri girl did not survive. So now revealing her identity does not cause harm because Nirbhaya at that time was alive when the case was reported. However, the Supreme Court had then intervened and had said that no, dead or alive does not matter because their identity remains and their family is affected by it. So it has, I believe, or because you're from journalism background, I knew the journalists who reported it. I know that it was a mistake made. So it had nothing to do with Kashmir, first of all. I will also give you an example to, if you do not agree, when 26/11, the Mumbai attacks happened, the media was heavily criticized later because they were showing live visuals which actually helped the terrorists, right? But then in the future, like, the media learned from it, and in the future, when something like the Pathankot military base attack happened, the media did not repeat those mistakes. So Indian media has also been evolving. It has been learning. The Supreme Court has obviously had to intervene, especially in this case, on the issue of sensationalizing crime and rape. So we are evolving, and you will see that the cases that followed, where the victim had lost her life in rape cases, then the identities were not revealed. So I think the answer to it was not Kashmir. It was first, it was a mistake that is now being learned from and being rectified. Thank you.
Thank you for, yeah, I mean, these are questions we should ask, right? Like, they are tough questions, and I'm glad that we have like platforms where we can talk about it. I mean, research is about, you bring your own perspective, I bring my own perspective, and then we bring it together to make a whole, to serve the community that we're researching. And I'm glad that we're able to talk about these issues, no matter how difficult they may be. So let me ask this question from Adina. So someone wants to know that, has there been a shift in attitude among young girls, right? And I'm really interested in this too, because, it's not just like older women or middle-aged women or young women like us. Like, what about young girls when it comes to conversation about menstruation? Is there a way that you can connect the use of the herbs to ongoing conversations about menstrual cycle and reproductive among young girls?
Yeah, I would
Yes.
like to comment also,
Yeah.
partly with we both are together into this paper. So if you allow me to answer it, so I would also like to come in at some point of time, but let Arvina respond first and then I'll come.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So yes, there is a slight shift, like, or I also like highlighted in my presentation as well, that when it comes to talking about period tracking apps, the young girls are recommending it to their friends, to their female cousins, their female acquaintances. They are. And slowly they are building a community around themselves where they are talking about it. They are trying to give information, gain information, and then also discuss about these things. But it is only happening because of this digital intervention. If we take it out from the scene, I don't think such conversations would take place, but only because of this digital medium or intervention, I can say that yes, that young girls are you finding it a platform where they can talk about these things. Even teenagers, when they go through menarche, they do look for these health apps. They do install it in their phones, and they build a community around themselves and discuss it within themselves, but not at a broader level as it should have been. I hope it answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I again, like a lot of this research that we do, it doesn't matter if it's we're not trying to reach everyone at once. As long as 2 people, 3 people, a group of people can be impacted and can have a change in attitude, and this conversation can move just a little bit forward, just a little bit better. I mean, it fulfills the purpose of our research. And thank you for that answer. Krishna, do you want to ask a question now?
Yes, I have a follow-up question for Ishraf. So you have mentioned that, Ishraf, are you here?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have mentioned that the journalists, they should be like aware of the, ethics of the journalism practices, like while covering a news of rape or any other abuse. So it's my observation is that it's not only about describing, like writing about a rape incident or molestation incident. The way they headline it, the way they put the headline, it's very intriguing. Firstly, because sometimes I have seen that they have mentioned like a young girl was raped, or she was raped by how many people. So, and I have a feeling that the audience, especially the digital audience who scroll the Facebook in South Asian region, Facebook is very famous. So they actually like click those sort of headlines, like mostly if they see those sort of headlines which is a bit intriguing, a bit offensive in a way. Even it applies for the any news about the celebrities, what they are doing, their scandals, the headlines, that it's really demeaning, and it's really like it's as much demeaning as the description itself. So I want to like hear your views on it. Like, have you considered this fact in your study, or are you planning to include this in your further study? Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much for the question. This is actually what I've talked all through, but the word sensationalism, whatever you've said is actually all a part of sensationalism. What you've added to it is in the digital world, we make headlines more and more sensational because everything boils down to a click. We all need those hits and views and those clicks. And that is why we are promoting sensationalism in especially crimes against women more and more, because we not only want to bring the click, but our motive to increase our business, to increase our hit, is directly related to titillating the audience, right? And what you said is completely true, and that is why I repeatedly mentioned that a recommendation that not only a general training but a training specifically for rapes is important in journalism schools and then in the newsroom, because unlike any other crime, for example, even a suicide, we want to be very careful about how it is going to impact the family. But rape is not just a problem that is limited to media coverage. It has so many other issues. We even use it politically for elections. In wars around the world, we have seen how women have been used, how crime against women has been used. Uh, in Indian context, the caste-based rapes are so common in the Hindi heartland, for example. So everywhere, this is such a big challenge that we need to tackle it head on, and specifically because every time I try and present this recommendation, the agreement is that yes, all crime coverage is sensationalized, and we need to have training for that. But I stress on the fact that rape is a specific kind of crime, a special kind of crime that we need to consider individually. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Like, we're rounding up because we're preparing for the next session. But I have one final question for Miriam. And the question is, Do you think podcast reaches more people? Why focus on podcast? I understand that it might be like your pet project, what you want to do, but do you think podcast is more effective in reaching a wider audience than other social media platforms?
I'll quickly answer this question. Podcast, I think my intention with the podcast is to make a digital archive. It needs to be an archive that's always present for people to hear. And I think questions that have been asked today, including questions of like how the Muslim identity needs to be understood, there needs to be an archive. You know, Islam is not perhaps in danger. It's the minorities and the marginalized groups that are, and we need to recognize that. So yeah, I'll just end on that note.
Thank you guys. It's been a wonderful section, and we really appreciate everyone, for staying behind. We understand it's late, back at home, and thank you for just staying with us. I'll vape of our round of this section. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Oladoin and Kushnut, for leading us in this wonderful conversation. As you can tell, it's very popular from the questions we received. But I also want to be mindful, as Oladoin mentioned, of the time of people who are joining us from, I think it's past midnight or almost past midnight for Mariam. So we completely understand if you have to take off, but thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I do have one quick question, which I meant to do with the first session as well, I couldn't do. So if I could invite over the presenters from the second session and just ask you one quick question, which is, if you have to define your current research program in one keyword, what would that be? So you just get one word to answer this question. Mariam, I'll start with you.
Celebration
Awesome.
of voices.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Radhika? Sorry, you're muted.
Connection.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ishrat?
I don't think, yeah,
okay.
It's not here.
All right, Arbina?
Knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you.